So, which media company is picking your pocket right now? I mean, that's kind of a snide way to open class, but I want you to think about the fact that there are these huge media companies out there. We call them global media conglomerates, and they are picking your pockets effectively every single day because as you go throughout your life, every single day, just about, you're being touched by these media companies through the television shows that you might be exposed to, not just the ones that you're choosing to watch, but the ones that you're exposed to when you go to a bar, when you go to a doctor's office, when you go to a friend's house, through the web pages that you choose to read, through the songs that you choose to listen to on the radio, sort of choose. I mean, we just basically turn a radio on and let the radio deliver what songs we're going to listen to. And if you happen to come across a newspaper and look at a newspaper in a convenience store even, you're being touched by a media company. And those media companies are touching you in many other ways as well. Songs on your iPhone, for example, having come from iTunes is another way that you're getting media properties that are being distributed by huge media companies, in this case, Apple. So yeah, we're talking about media today as a business because primarily, especially in the United States, media are a business. They are for-profit enterprises. They are supposed to make money. They're supposed to have a bottom line that is revenue positive. Now you may say, of course, that's the way that all media operate, is it not? Well, not necessarily. If you look at other countries, mainly European countries, and this is one of my areas of expertise, I've done a lot of research in international media and I've published a book called Comparing Media from Around the World. If you look at European countries, you'll find that a lot of media are not necessarily set up to make money. Some of them are owned by trusts, like the newspaper The Guardian in England. The Guardian newspaper is owned by a trust and its job is mainly to get the news out. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Other media properties in Europe are actually funded, it's not directly by the government, but the government has passed a law that people who own TV sets have to pay a license fee, and the license fee then is money that is collected and then distributed to TV producers so that TV producers don't have to rely on advertising to make money, if you know what I mean. They have this license fee. It's about $300 a year that you pay. And that's where you get the BBC. The BBC World Service has no commercials, and it's able to focus on content that doesn't have to necessarily please advertisers. That's a discussion for another time, but I'm just sort of setting the framework for today because we're talking about media in the United States for the most part, mass media, mass communication, and we're talking about mass communication as being a business. And by the way, when we use those words media versus mass communication, let's distinguish between the two, right? Mass communication is the process. It's the process of getting that content out to thousands or millions of people, and that process is going to involve distribution channels like television, satellite, internet, etc. Media, mass media, is the technology itself that's capable of communicating with the masses. So television is a mass medium. There is no such word, by the way, as medias. That's not the plural. The singular is medium, and the plural is media. So we're taking on global media conglomerates in today's class. Chapter 3, we're taking on the media business, but when we're talking about these big companies, we're really talking about them as global media conglomerates. And they're really hard to see. I mean, they're these big parent companies up here like News Corporation. Like, you probably don't know about that company, the News Corporation. What's that? It's a weird sounding name, right? It's actually the parent company of Fox. Yeah, the Fox network and the Sun newspaper in England. They're both owned by the News Corporation. So when we're talking about a lot of these parent companies, they don't really want to be having a presence in your conscience. They want to have the smaller properties, like Disney wants to have ABC, is what you think about, not necessarily Disney when you're watching ABC News, or ESPN. Disney wants you to be thinking about ESPN, not necessarily Disney. So they're a little bit hard to get to. Also, I want to say that in this chapter already, a lot of information is out of date. I have been, I tried to save money for you in the class by getting you the not so recent edition of the book. And that does mean, though, that I have an obligation to point out to you that a lot of these companies that are talked about in the book, they've jockeyed for different positions. In fact, here's a big one right now. The biggest media company in the world is actually Alphabet. Alphabet is the parent company of Google. Yeah, Google is the biggest global media conglomerate in terms of revenue, in terms of size, in terms of scale in the world today. And that's not covered by the chapter. But nonetheless, we can still get across some very basic ideas, including this one that I'd like to go to. And that is in the United States, US media have a tradition of being privately owned and for profit. And that means that the media are not owned by the government in the United States for the most part. They are not necessarily owned by citizen groups, although you do find that in the United States. Most media are corporations that are privately owned and they are for profit. And it starts very, very, very early on in our history, going back to 1638. Can you believe that? That's before we were even a country. 1638 in the United States, we have the Cambridge Press. The Cambridge Press, first printing press in the United States, and it's publishing the whole, spelled W-H, the whole book of Psalms, and that's spelled Psalms, religious texts, the whole book of Psalms. It was a for-profit newspaper. Yeah, one of the very first mass media, plural, in this country, and it was for profit making. And other people come along, and one person we're going to mention is going to come up a few times in these next classes, and that's Ben Franklin, the great constitutionalist for the United States, but an inventor as well, but also a person who was very, very, very much involved in mass media. And one of his first forays into mass media was owning and publishing the Pennsylvania Gazette. Yeah, right here in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Gazette, published by Ben Franklin. And he was a ruthless business person, by the way. He hired the best editors and readers. He tried to steal them from other newspapers, the best editors, that is. And he was a kind of a media mogul. So what that is a person who strategically builds the company into an empire. And one of the things that he did was when he was Postmaster General for the United States, he blocked other newspapers from being distributed by the U.S. Postal Service. But his paper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, he allowed to be distributed. So he used that position of power to leverage a monopoly for his own business there. All right, we also want to highlight the idea that national news is a product. You may not think of it that way. It's a product. It's a business. It's an area of media content that is for sale. So every time you see news on CNN or Fox or MSNBC, or if you're a traditional person, perhaps your grandparents watching those three big television networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox also has grown into a big network. If you're watching any of those, the idea of national news as a product did not occur until we had magazines. Now, I'm slowly introducing individual media in this class. I mentioned newspapers a couple times. Now I'm mentioning magazines. We're going to be getting to each of those in individual chapters and spending a whole chapter on them, like just magazines. But for now, I'm introducing them incrementally so that we can start to see how they fit into this business picture. And magazines were the first mass medium in this country to develop a national culture in the United States, where people started to feel like they are Americans before they feel like they are Pennsylvanians or New Yorkers or Californians. And that's because the content in magazines had national appeal. You started to have national ads for products like soap that could be bought all across the United States and the same manufacturer of the soap. So what I'm trying to say here is magazines start to build a national culture, and advertising starts to become a big piece of that, and national network news, TV news, builds on top of that the idea that people will be interested a lot in what's happening to the nation, as opposed to what is just happening in East Stroudsburg or Phillipsburg, New Jersey, or wherever your local area is. All right, so now I'd like to go on to the big global media conglomerates. We're going to say a few words about these, even though some of them will be a little bit out of date, but it will still get across the idea of how big these companies were in the recent past and what major players they are today. And we've mentioned Disney a few times already in this class. And of course, it's got the legacy of Walt Disney and his cartoons and Mickey Mouse. And then you start to see Disney as it grows. It starts to purchase basically the stories that it then turns into films and TV shows. You know, Snow White, that wasn't written at Disney. These are fables written mostly by Europeans that Disney has gone out and acquired. Cinderella, all of them put together into this umbrella organization, the Disney Corporation, which also owns movies, It owns a theme park. It has its own production division for animation, the Pixar Corporation. And it's got so many media properties. You can Google it on your own. In fact, if you're a really good student in this class today, I hope that on your own, on your phone, wherever at work, you Google one of these companies and look at how many different properties they own across the world. Disney is definitely a big one. iTunes, part owner of Hulu. Disney is a mammoth organization, and it also has a special place in the American conscience. We use Disney to take over babysitting duties for our kids once they get bored with PBS as a television channel. Now we start to say, oh, let's give them Disney safe. Disney's next. So we have this kind of embedded idealism about Disney being the perfect, beautiful family life in the United States culture that is also embedded in the way that we think of this company, if you catch what I'm trying to get across there. Not that Disney, by the way, is not without it's how shall we say, it's a controversy for putting out subliminal messages of actually very sexual things. There's a whole cult about that as well. You can Google that if you want to learn more about that. All right, time to move on. Let's talk about Time Warner. I don't know if you know about this company. This company built itself basically as a cable company. It kind of has an interesting history just because of all the different pieces there. You've got the Time magazine part of it, and then eventually that joined up with Warner Brothers. They were put together into Time Warner, and then Time Warner started purchasing all of these cable systems across the United States. If you live here in East Stroudsburg, you get Blue Ridge Cable. If you go further south to Lehigh Valley, it's Comcast. Or Service Electric. Those are the companies. So you don't see Time Warner in this area of the country, but Time Warner's out there in plenty of local communities all across the United States, supplying people with television, supplying people with satellite and cable television. And Time Warner you can look up on your own as well. All right, so now we're going to go to the next company, and the next company that we're going to talk about is a company that you probably also don't know about. You probably don't know about the parent company, but you surely know about some of the sub-properties. I'm talking about the Viacom company, Viacom company. Very interesting company here because it's got a relationship with CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting company, and this is a Columbia Broadcasting System company. Very strange relationship here. Okay, so you have CBS, a really big TV network, huge until cable, and cable took off some of the audiences, but back in the day, you had these three big TV networks, CBS, ABC, NBC. We're talking about 1970s, to some extent 1980s. CBS has this big company, and it wants to start a film production unit, so it forms the company Viacom to do film production within the CBS overall corporate empire. But what happens is that little company Viacom becomes so big that it buys CBS. So they say that the child ate the parent in this Viacom-CBS relationship, which continues to be, they're kind of like equals today. They share similar people on their boards, but they're still separate entities today. A very strange relationship there. This is the company that owns MTV. Viacom has MTV, VH1. Yeah, it has those properties right down there in Times Square. Interesting, a side story with CBS. The Columbia and the Columbia Broadcasting System comes from the kind of cigar that William Paley, the founder of CBS, was importing into the United States. And when we get to radio in this class, we'll find out that William Paley, the cigar importer, bought a whole radio network, the CBS radio network, just so that he could advertise his cigars. And that right there points to the essence of American media starting out with a business motive, a business profit motive. In this case, a cigar advertisement formed a whole radio network, which then went on to form a film production unit, and now it's this monster company. Crazy story. All right, the next company I'm also pretty sure you don't know about is called the Bertelsmann Company. Bertelsmann Company, Bertelsmann, Bertelsmann, German company. German company known mostly for its book publishing and song lyric or song sheet publishing as well. That's where it really has a stronghold based there in Europe. A side note that you'll find that how it's touched your lives is one of its properties is actually a TV channel in England. This German company owns a TV channel in England called Channel 5. Channel 5 developed the show Pop Idol. Pop Idol was noticed by Fox in the United States, and Fox imported that program into the United States and renamed it American Idol. So you can say in a way that Bertelsmann has touched you if you've ever seen American Idol, which I'm sure you have, even if you're not a fan of it. So that's a big company. It's very big into Europe, has a lot of broadcasting properties as well. It's not just book publishing. All right, next up is a company right here locally. It's a major player in the world. It's the Comcast company, also known as NBC Universal. Again, we have a lot of different companies going on here. Boy, what another strange history here. We've got a water company in France. Yeah, you heard me right, water company, bottled water. Vivendi, which bought Universal, a film production company in the United States, which was bought by NBC, National Broadcasting Corporation, which you're reading about in this chapter. And then NBC and all that whole package was bought by Comcast, a cable network. Water company to a Philadelphia cable network. It's a big company. Comcast, oh boy, has a lot of properties, has sports, Phillies, Flyers, has its own channel 48, Comcast, as well as providing cable services to people all across the world and creating content. And as part of the legacy of Comcast, you have the RCA Corporation that was way back in this mix as well. The RCA, or Radio Corporation of America. And that Radio Corporation of America established a smaller company called NBC. And that company, NBC, National Broadcasting Company, had two radio networks, two colors, red and blue. And those two networks, one of them had to be sold off, because the government decided that company, NBC, had too much control over people with all these radio networks, too much potential for propaganda or for raising advertising rates. So the government forced NBC to sell off one of those radio networks, and that became the ABC radio network, American Broadcasting Company, which then later went over to television. So we've got some interesting history right there. This company, Comcast, they own Telemundo, Bravo, USA Channel, Weather Channel. Yeah, a lot of different cable channels. All right, then we have Google. It's the biggest company in the world today. We'll be talking a lot more about Google in this class. It's sort of shaken up the way that media properties are owned, because it's a different animal, right? It's a search engine. And it's converted a whole new way of advertising. You can talk click-throughs and page likes, and it's software that it uses called AdWords. That's the name of its software that Google uses. That's what it's allowed it to grow into this absolutely incredible corporation. It also makes phones, right? Makes operating softwares for phones. I think Android or Droid. I always get them mixed up. One of them is the Google operating software, as well as the primary search engine that people use. So we'll talk some more about Google as we get later on in the class. There's some other major players. These are the big ones that I've mentioned, but in the newspaper area, you've got a big newspaper company that's called Gannett, Gannett. It's the biggest publisher of newspapers in the U.S., even though that industry has been massively shrunken because of the competition of electronic media and getting news other places other than hard copy newspaper. But that company, Gannett, owns USA Today. USA Today is still a very popular newspaper. Every time you go to a hotel, it's under the front door. Or under the door of your room. That's how they distribute. And that company also publishes local newspapers at the same printing plants where USA Today is published. So the Pocono Record might be published there, or Morning Call, if you know that Allentown newspaper, might be published at one of these manufacturing facilities of USA Today or Gannett. And then there's another big company there, when I mentioned in the area of radio, called Clear Channel, or iHeart Radio, as it has been reformed. iHeart Radio, or formerly the Clear Channel company, which you can still see Clear Channel on one of their brands, and that is billboards. Right, all over Pennsylvania is a big billboard advertising state. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I think it wrecks the environment. But big billboard advertising, you can see several companies that do that. You got Adams, you've got Lamar, and you've got Clear Channel. You see Clear Channel all over. And in fact, Clear Channel, or iHeartMedia, they own a cluster of radio stations in the Lehigh Valley. They own B104, they own WZZO, they own WAEB, and they own one other station. So they own 4 stations down there in the Lehigh Valley. That's an example of how a big parent company like Clear Channel can own several media properties. All right, now what we're going to move to now is a discussion of this idea of a short head versus a long tail. What is that all about? A short head versus a long tail. Well, this is an economic model that is used to understand how media make money or how media operate as businesses. And it says there's really two ways to be successful as a business in the mass communication industry. And one is to be successful in terms of a short head, and the other is to be successful in terms of a long tail. So a short head refers to the sales of media products that are fast and furious. The volume is very, very high. So it's a short head because sales are represented as being very, very high. You can look at the graph in your book and you can see what I'm referring to. You got a short head there because sales are flying off the charts. Anything that Taylor Swift puts out, anything that Bruno Mars puts out in the music world is an example. Anything that Marvel puts out in the film studio short of a disaster of a film is an example of a short head of sales or blockbuster films, CDs and TV shows and web pages with tons of clicks. Short head, quick, high volume sales. And the inventory, if it's a physical thing like a DVD, which is not too popular anymore, most media is stored in clouds, but you have people who collect DVDs. If you go to a place where DVDs are sold, Walmart, for example, when you have a short head strategy, you have many of those in inventory. You have like 10 DVDs in inventory because they're selling so fast. Okay, the opposite strategy is the long tail strategy. The long tail, and this is what happens after the short head when a product starts to decline in popularity. Short tail, like a TV show, like one of the longest running TV shows is still Seinfeld. Even that show went off the air years before you were born. That show is still being seen, and I'm sure that you've seen that show. It's got a long tail. It used to have a short head when it was very, very popular every week. You see it on TV. Most advertisers were trying to get into that show. Less and less popular. Obviously, it's out of date. Actors have moved on, but it's still on. It's sold in syndication on cable networks. It's a long tail. So if you have a product that's done by a singer, Garth Brooks, for example, a country music singer, you go to Walmart, he's probably in the long tail of his career. You might find one CD that is for sale by him because he's in the long tail strategy portion of his career. All right, now we're going to go to the final part of the class, and that is to ask the big question that needs to be asked every time you're trying to study media as a business, and that is who controls the media? Who controls the media by virtue of the financial trail that exists because media are trying to make money, and the money is, in essence, is going to give the people who have the money and the ability to distribute the money the ability to control the media. So the first answer to that question, because there are many answers, is who controls the media. A lot of people have money in the industry. The first is the businesses themselves, the big global media conglomerates. They control the media. Disney controls news that goes on TV, ABC News. If there's an accident in a roller coaster in Disney World in Florida, do you think that's going to be the top story in ABC News? Probably not, unless there's a lot of pressure to cover it because everybody else is. So the first answer is the conglomerates control the media. The second answer is The second answer is advertisers. Advertisers control the media. They're the ones who say, hey, we are representing Tide detergent. We want to advertise Tide detergent on this family-friendly sitcom on television. And because of that, we don't want to have anything in this TV sitcom that is racy, that pushes a line, that's overly sexual, that defies morals. Whoa. Now, that conversation doesn't go on directly. It's not like the Tide detergent people say all this. It's just assumed. If you are a TV ad salesperson and you have a huge account with Tide, you don't want to jeopardize it. And that's the way it works with advertisers that control the media. Another answer to that question, who controls the media, is government. Yeah, government through the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. It's a government agency. And Congress, they can pass laws. And they can affect whether companies can merge together or not. We're looking at AT&T, whether that's going to merge with other companies. Government decides about that. And then we have three other answers to this question. Who controls the media? And another answer is special interest groups. Special interest groups, these are people that come together as individual citizens, and they come together to form groups, and then they pressure media. You've got a big one out there called the Parents Television Council, or PTC. They pressure media organizations not to do shows that are harmful to the youth's versions of youth's perception of self-esteem. So, for example, they argue against shows that glorify cosmetic surgery, like the Kardashians. That would be criticized by the Parents Television Council because it's making cosmetic surgery seem natural and normal when it's not, and it's expensive as well. All right, next up is news sources. They also control the media. These are the people who get interviewed for news stories, or the people who also control the channels for distributing news. They are the people who create events that make the news, like the President of the United States. So news sources control a lot of the content in the media as well. And then finally, who controls the media? You do, the audience. Yeah, the audience does, through the power of interactivity, through the power of deciding not to click through on a web page. Okay, that's going to go away, that web page, if it doesn't get a lot of click-throughs. Through the power of social media, through shaming or complimenting or inquiring or asking. Social media propels your ideas forward, and they get inputted into the people who produce media content. And the audience today has the most power it has ever had in terms of affecting the content that you get to see, because of all the different ways that producers of content can get feedback from the audience today. Through the phone primarily, but also through email, through all kinds of other methods electronically of gathering data and information that then gets inputted into the decision-making that affects media content. So there you have it. In essence, in the United States, media is a business, and each and every media property just about has one and only goal, and that is to make money. Have a great day.